a lot of the confusion that can stem from these relationships, a lot of the difficulty in making sense of it is trying to understand where this is coming from the narcissistic partner. The thing is you can't because the wiring is different. There is a different way of looking at the world, a different way of thinking about it. And unless you think that way, I don't think you can really genuinely get into the narcissist's head and understand what exactly is happening there, because it really is a very different set of wiring. I really believe that.
Welcome back to Prey versus Predator. We are here today with Dr. Tamara Knott, and we have had the most interesting conversation. If you have not heard it, please go back and listen to our first episode with Dr. Knott. She is an amazing, just a wealth of information here. Dr. Knott, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you come by this wealth of information?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a clinical counselor, registered clinical counselor in Vancouver, and I've been doing this work for about a decade and a half. I have a particular specialty in interpersonal relationships, although I see individuals as well. And a lot of my interest in the predator-prey relationship is based on having encountered a couple of narcissists in my past, and also seeing the occasional partner of a narcissist come through my office and noticing that there were some very common things about how they were treated by their partners, how they were feeling. And there was a huge gap in how to treat people as a counselor, how to treat people who are dealing with somebody who has a personality disorder or who is a narcissist. And so it was really important to do this research into partners of narcissists, because out of everybody who is affected by a narcissist, it's going to be the partner. And the effects are not pleasant. They extend into all kinds of wellness concerns and loss of self and those kinds of things. So I thought that it was a really important place to dig deeper into and try and expand some of the academic record on that.
Brilliant.
I guess what we're looking at now from this discussion is we're talking about the stages of a relationship with a narcissist. So go ahead, please start explaining what the stages are. And we'll probably interject with questions and ideas and thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so the relationships I was looking at were more committed types of relationships. And I was not expecting to find quite as many commonalities as I did. And you really could see the cyclical nature of these relationships. And so what I did is I broke it into 5 stages. And because I was able to luckily use people's hindsight knowledge to start right at the beginning and look at the aftermath all the way through to the aftermath. So what I labeled them as is number 1 is the foundations of the relationship. Number 2 is below the surface. So like getting a peek about what's really there. Number 3 is the roller coaster. And this is where the most sort of cyclical stuff would happen, like ups and downs and back and forth. Then there was a recovery and leaving piece. And I deliberately put recovery before leaving here. I know it sounds like it's in a weird order, but the reason is because I was finding that people were actually starting the recovery process before they left. So anyways, that's why it's labeled that way. And then the final one is hindsight, because there was a lot of realizations that people were having after they had the relationship terminate. So they were able to kind of look back on things and start to make sense of it from a place of distance and clarity. And a lot of knowledge came from that place as well. So those were the 5 stages. And would you like me to kind of go into each one a little bit more?
Yeah, please. Helpful?
Yeah. So what the foundations is the meeting, obviously, and getting to know one another. And what I found is that most partners were generally in a good place, but were having some kind of difficult life transition. So it could have looked like a breakup, or it could have looked like, moving away from home, going to school. There was just a wide variety of a bit of upheaval or higher stress happening for people. And I think that might have provided a bit of an opening for the narcissist as well. And it usually was a really intense and rapid kind of wooing process. So the narcissist was able to draw their partner in really fast, and they use tools like love bombing or really sort of acknowledging important things to their partner in a way that other people couldn't. And it was clear, and this is maybe a hindsight bit, but there was sort of long-term goals about this predator-prey kind of chase in that moment. It's obviously very exciting for the narcissist. And even if their partner was resisting, they were still persisting. And eventually what this all created is a kind of trauma bond over time. So, that sort of intensity started the foundation of this trauma bond.
So what makes it a trauma bond?
So to have a trauma bond, there has to be intensity, complexity, and inconsistency. So those three things have to take place in a relationship. And with my participants, there's a great deal of empathy for their partner as well. So being able to step into their partner's shoes, or at least what they thought was their partner's shoes, to see their point of view and giving them the benefit of the doubt. And so it creates a bit of a dependence, this intensity and real fast enmeshment, because you're not becoming bonded to the person that you truly know. You're becoming bonded to a person you think you know. The complexity piece is all the different layers that exist within a relationship like this. So what you see on the surface is not what you get. And that sort of leads to the third piece, the inconsistency piece, which is there is no guiding star here. The goalposts are always changing, and the expectations are always changing. And, most of my participants, for example, were people who wanted to fulfill a person's needs or wants. And so we're constantly trying and not succeeding the narcissist would let them know, you're not succeeding in this. And so that's the basis of a trauma bond, is bonding through those three things that are very destabilizing.
Would you say that there's a vampire quality? Like sometimes that the narcissist is needing the stuff that the prey has. Is it more of that sort of relationship as well, where it's like parasitic? I need something that's in you, so I'm just gonna get it out of you.
In the later stages, people describe themselves as drained, as exhausted, as depleted, as, shell of myself. That's a quote from a few people. So that idea of the vampire energy is absolutely there. And what's interesting about this is going back to research around narcissists themselves, is narcissists do require, and part of the diagnostic criteria is that they require admiration and praise and that kind of thing from people around them. And so a lot of the risk factors for getting into a relationship with a person like that is if you are able to provide caretaking and empathy and forgiveness and admiration. And so, but it's never enough. It's just more and more and more is required. And so even the most empathetic person, even the most willing to give person is going to be sucked dry.
Yeah. I have a question about, so this is the first step, the foundations. Sometimes I think of it as like these people are evil geniuses, right? So you see these cartoons where you see the evil genius with a big head and it's like, wahahaha, and they've got their blueprint that they just kind of open up and this is what I'm going to do. Or, so is that the narcissist? They have a blueprint of what they're going to do, or is there planning is more instinctual. Within the moment, there's a need I have to fill, and I don't know what it is, so I am doing these things because it does feel strategic. They are choosing people for a strategic reason. But is it blueprint strategic or is it intuitive strategic?
Like, are you asking, like, do they know what they're doing?
Yes. I guess that's a better way of saying it, but I have this visual of a blueprint, so I like that visual.
Yeah. So I'm going to answer the second piece first because I think the other one is more scary.
Yeah.
So from an innate point of view, narcissists do have certain talents and skills that they do have a natural ability to draw people in typically, or to manipulate to get what they want. These are skills that really especially shine in that first foundation stage where they're trying to get you. They want you, they're chasing you, you're the prize, let's grab it. And so they make use of, I think, a lot of those really innate talents. However, to speak to the strategic piece, this is really, as I said, I think this is scary because a lot of research, especially more recent research, is showing that narcissists are very aware of what they're doing and why they're doing it. And not only do they have a plan in the short term, but they also have really, really long-term plans that they're willing to invest in over time. So if they want to convince you of something, they will set the stage even years before they think they'll actually get that. And they're willing to work at that, massage it. One of my participants talked about it like he planted the seed and he nurtured it until I sort of agreed to what he was talking about. And a number of my participants, and this is how scary it can be, I think, is they were going into the relationship not wanting children at all in their life. They had made that decision. That was how it was going to be for them. And they indicated to me that this is the only person on the planet who could have convinced me to have children. And it didn't happen right away. It was just subtle suggestions along the way. Like one person, for instance, they capitalized on their sense of FOMO, fear of missing out. Like, what an adventure. Wouldn't it be such an adventure to do this thing? Knowing that this person was attracted to doing new things and enjoying adventures and that kind of thing. So it's that strategy is there, and it's proven, like I said, by research, but also I've heard from people that narcissists in their lives have admitted to doing things. Really? And they remember things from years ago that they've done and admitted to it in later stages that, yeah, I did that to do this to you. In one case, just to play mind games. That's one of the stories I heard. Their goal wasn't anything in particular, just to play mind games with their partner. That's the only reason they did it. But that was their strategy. And years later, they remembered it and remembered why.
Well, it's so scary. If you're a prey, you do not think that way at all.
No.
You do not have a concept even one of our beginning podcasts, we talked about gaslighting each other. And I think we even tried to gaslight each other. And we really struggled with trying to do it because it was just not part of our DNA or even part of the way so the thought of being that strategic is mind-blowing to me. So thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
I actually think that's a really, really important point. And I would like to emphasize that because a lot of the confusion that can stem from these relationships, a lot of the difficulty in making sense of it is trying to understand where this is coming from the narcissistic partner. So the thing is you can't because the wiring is different. There is a different way of looking at the world, a different way of thinking about it. And unless you think that way, I don't think you can really genuinely get into the narcissist's head and understand what exactly is happening there, because it really is a very different set of wiring. I really believe that. And it's freeing for some people to understand that, because it does show that it's not their fault. And it is something they couldn't have changed no matter how hard they tried, that they couldn't have been better or done differently or whatever. And that the good news is they don't think like that. They have empathy. They have the ability to do well for others and to participate in sharing and reciprocal relationships. And so ultimately that is a good news piece, but really frustrating, when you're dealing with it, obviously.
So are narcissists born that way? This is the old nature and nurture question. Yeah.
From what I have read, I think that it's a combination of nature and nurture. So I do think that people are, I think there's a predisposition. And if you kind of go into epigenetics style of research, some people might see it as a light switch that gets turned on or off based on the environment a narcissist grows up in.
Wow.
But you do see it through the generations. So, kids of narcissists, some will end up having these narcissistic qualities, some won't, and their children, and et cetera, et cetera. And there is some evidence to suggest that even if the narcissist, the primary narcissist, isn't in the home, that some kids also do become narcissists. So that suggests the genetic part of it. But environment does make a difference too. So you can teach certain qualities, I guess, of narcissism, becomes learned behavior. I think empathy is something that kids have to start learning from an early age to be higher on the scale of empathy. So potentially somebody might be born with a switch, as I was talking about, and either it's activated or it's not by the way they're empathetically or not treated.
Interesting.
I just finished reading a book, and the author suggested, so the book was about evil, human evil. So this is M. Scott Peck, People of the Lie. The book is 40 years old and is still just super relevant, as relevant as it was 40 years ago. But he was suggesting that narcissists, when they're very young, are taught or have come to the awareness that they need to protect themselves and their ego at all costs. And as they go through life, everything is about protecting the ego. And if they're in a situation where perhaps their ego does not need to be protecting, they will create circumstances to, how did he phrase it? He would create circumstances where people would need to protect his ego.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that I think that absolutely makes sense, because we do know, again, this is decades of research around narcissism that shows that the ego there is a fragility there. And there is a difference between grandiose and the more vulnerable subtype, or covert and overt.
Yeah.
In that grandiose doesn't present like they have a fragile ego, but they certainly act viciously when ego is attacked. So I absolutely think a lot of their actions are in service of fulfilling that need. And that I believe that is a large part of the pathology of narcissism, is that ego protection. So if I'm going to use a real life example,
please do.
Yeah.
Trump.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
As soon as you say ego and narcissist, he's one of the first visions in my head.
Yeah. And I'm not going to do a diagnosis here, but
no.
What I am going to say is the reaction to, for instance, this idea that he has small hands. I don't know if you remember hearing the news stories about that.
Yeah, he's very sensitive about his hands.
But somebody made an offhand tweet about it once. And that was the focus of his blasts of information for weeks, maybe months after the fact. He could not let go of this just offhand comment that somebody made about his small hands. And that's a great example of that type of ego fragility, where if you pinpoint something that is some kind of ego insecurity, he'll go on attack, like viciously and constantly, and not let it go for a very long time. And I think that you can sort of extrapolate that to that particular element of the narcissistic personality, is that the first reaction is get them so that I can protect myself.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, so interesting.
Okay, I feel like we have completely derailed Dr.
We need
Knott.
to go on to step 2.
We're only on step 2.
No, we're on step 1.
Okay.
We need to go to number 2.
Let's go back. Dr. Knott, you were talking about the stages.
Number 2
of this type of relationship, with a predatory relationship. One was the foundation, which I feel like we derailed you on.
Sorry.
Our apologies. We tend to do that. What's step 2? What's stage 2?
Yeah. So step 2 is below the surface. And this follows the narcissist kind of setting the stage for the partner to be the worker in the relationship. So they're starting to plant the seeds here. Now, below the surface evolves once the narcissist feels like their partner is starting to become committed. So that's when they can drop their facade and start to test the boundaries. So that's when the partner might start to see some real red flags happening. And that's generally pretty quick in the relationship. It doesn't take very long. What's happening conversely is the narcissist is also starting to recognize that their partner is a whole person. So what they're attracted to is like attractiveness, status, intelligence, et cetera, those kinds of superficial types of qualities. But now the narcissist is starting to realize, oh, this person has needs. They're actually a whole person. They're not just this perfect image that I wanted. And so they start to disdain their partner. So this kind of like, I don't like that you're empathetic. I don't like that you're kind. I don't like that you, want something and are requiring me to do something. So in their minds, the partner starts to become somebody who doesn't have as much value to them because they don't value those qualities. And this is when empathy is no longer as useful to the narcissist. So they can kind of leave that behind a little bit. They don't have to make a show of it so much more. And so it starts to become a situation where the partner's voice is becoming a little bit diminished in that relationship. And as I said, this is setting the stage here for the partner to be the worker for the relationship, like caretaking the narcissist's emotional states and cheerleading and that kind of thing.
When you say worker, I just feel like that just connotates so much for me, an image of somebody who's their servant, or, snack my fingers and you will be of service to me. It's very interesting. So I think it's interesting, and I kind of like that you use that term worker, because it is almost a status thing.
Yeah. It's really the stage, I think, where this idea that you're in service to me is the start of this evolution into that kind of idea. So this is really where the manipulation begins, I would say.
And you're saying that this can happen quite quickly.
I think it does for most people. Not everybody. There were a few exceptions in my participant group, but overall, I would say that stage does happen because of the skill of the narcissist in creating these deep bonds fast, right? So you move into this stage quickly because they can. They've got their partner now, and they've tied them in somehow.
So when you say how are they like they're committed at this point, how are they committed? Like, is it just like we move in, we have a baby? Like, is it that level of commitment, or is it just like, I don't know, you're my boyfriend, girlfriend, or boyfriend? Like, what is the...
Sometimes it is as dramatic as that, but like in one instance, one of my participants married their partner within 6 weeks.
Wow.
Wow. Okay.
but it's not always. It could just be an emotional, and here's where narcissists are skilled, is reading these kinds of emotions. So it could just be an emotional tie where, the partner is thinking, oh, this is the greatest person since sliced bread. They match me in so many areas and we fit and we're all wonderful. And this is it for me. I know I've met the person. And if a narcissist senses that, it's like, okay, I've won the first level.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So it doesn't have to be a significant, like we've walked down the aisle and said, I do. The commitment could just be, I'm in love with you. And now the facade can be dropped.
Yeah. And it's not dropped completely. I will say that. Like it's because this stage is about testing, like it's really, I'm going to push a little bit and see where you give and see what methods work. And, where can I get away with things? And, the next stage that we move into, the roller coaster, is where boundaries are really being tested. So this is setting that stage for that. Like, let's just kind of poke a little bit here and there and see how far we can take this with this person. And, being that the prey is often very sort of accepting and flexible and that kind of thing. These are the people that narcissists can stay with, because anybody else would be like, oh no, forget this. I'm not going to be that generous to you.
Yeah.
I'm not willing to give you the benefit of the doubt that way. And whereas very sort of empathetic, kind people, they are a little bit more flexible that way.
Yeah, we talk about how the predator weaponizes what's beautiful about prey.
Yeah, exactly. These, very pro relationship qualities get weaponized, and in a relationship with a typically wired person, they would absolutely promote health in the relationship. In the narcissistic relationship, they're absolutely taken advantage of.
And it's so fascinating. Like what you're saying is really the same people in this type of relationship. The prey in this type of relationship are the relationship is toxic and really cruel and unpleasant. But these same prey can go on to another relationship and use the exact same set of skills and be loving and kind and warm and have these wonderful relationships.
Yes.
And
that's absolutely the case. And in fact, a lot of my participants did just that.
Wow.
So that's the good news, I guess, about my study is that in the aftermath, many people learned from this and use those pro-relationship skills to take them into very healthy, good places with their partners, their new partners.
Just makes me sad how much victim blaming there is, and how much focus there is on this assumption that we kind of all maybe carry with us at some level around there's got to be something wrong with the prey. Like, it can't just be the predator. You're looking for that. You're looking for predators. You're reenacting your childhood with the predator.
Yeah, did you choose this person because you're...
It's interesting. Before we derail too much, want to go back to this roller coaster idea. You said boundaries are really tested, but it sounds like at a different level than in phase 2 and stage 2.
Yeah, it's much more overt, I think, in this roller coaster phase. And this is where the cyclicalness of like the wooing, degradation of the relationship and re-wooing stuff all happens, because it is a very up and down kind of situation. So it's like in psychology, we use the term intermittent reward cycle. And a lot of times that's compared to a slot machine. So that happens to be the most powerful draw to something that we have, which is when you get intermittently rewarded. You have no sort of preconceived idea of when you're going to get rewarded, but you are there knowing you can be, and you're in hopes of it. And so you stick around, and there, maybe a quarter or two comes out. And that, I think, is really comparative to this type of relationship, because you've seen the good things. You know how it can be in the relationship. You know what your partner was like. And any rational person, I think, in a relationship kind of goes, well, past experience can inform present experience. Totally not the case. But you don't know that yet. So at this stage, there's that hope of that intermittent reward. And it's very powerful in terms of keeping somebody around. And so by this point, what's happening is the narcissist is learning and has great knowledge already in how to manipulate their partner. They know how to take advantage and how to push the boundaries. So by this point, the partner's starting to do like the lion's share of the caretaking of like the relationship, the narcissist's emotional needs, all of that kind of thing. And they're tiptoeing around the volatility. So their voices are starting to shrink, and they've already invested so much, so they keep trying and trying. And so it's really, really tough to think about leaving at these stages, because it's almost like you're doubling down on your investment. And at the same time, you're being told it's your fault.
Yeah.
You're, you feel like your sense of self is disappeared. The partner, the sort of narcissist, is sort of placing themselves as the be all end all of everything. So your focus is starting to change to make that person central to your identity. And so all this together is just, it really promotes like continuing the relationship, staying in the relationship. And it's bewildering. It's very confusing.
Can I ask you about this cycle that you say, like this cycle almost of abuse, right? Where the wooing begins. And we're talking about emotional abuse. So sometimes I think of like physical abuse. Somebody gets knocked around and then they see their partner on the floor covered in bruises, whatever, and then they feel bad or whatever. Here, I bought you, blah, blah, blah. Emotional abuse, does the person have to be cowering the corner for them to start the wooing again? Or is there, like, you know what I mean? I'm trying to, because we don't have bruises if you're in an emotional abusive situation. And so what does it take for the re-wooing to begin in these situations?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And the answer to that particular stage is, instead of those bruises or broken arm or whatever, it's more about the partner starting to either pull away or stopping being in service of the narcissist. That creates the sort of panic for the narcissist, like, oh, I better show up now. I better do this re-wooing again and make things, bring this person back into my service, back into being the worker. And so I actually did label it differently a little bit from the abuse cycle. I actually made my own little sort of narcissistic abuse cycle. And what I put is, the start is wooing or re-wooing. Next stage is a relationship commitment or recommitment. So like that enmeshing back into the relationship. Then there's the devolution. That's the poor treatment and the dropping of the facade and just kind of not taking into account the partner's needs. And then there's the pull away. So that's the partner deciding, like, I can't do this anymore, or I am so exhausted, I'm not able to. And then the re-wooing cycle starts all over again. So same kind of concept, different labels, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm wondering with this, when you use the word wooing, for myself as a survivor of predatory behavior, I would never describe what I had as wooing. What I had was kind of this but I would definitely use that word roller coaster for sure. I think that fit really well. But I think this idea of, like, for me, is it possible that the wooing can be subtle in terms of maybe the wooing is just normal? Like, or an absence of punishment, or
a crumb. I was thinking a crumb.
Like, so instead of, like, slamming doors or huffing and puffing or being angry or having like a tone, you'd just be talked to. I would just be conversed with normally, as opposed to under this anger or rage, this undertone of anger kind of thing. Is that possible?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point, because, wooing doesn't necessarily cover it all. And I did notice that this cycle devolves. And so wooing and re-wooing maybe becomes less relevant over time too. So really what people are trying to get back to is normal, especially in the later stages. And I don't think the grand gestures and romance happens for everybody in a narcissistic relationship. Not all narcissists do that. So it does happen that way.
Okay, so sometimes, like Jill was saying, it could be a crumb. Mm-hmm. It could be just a return to normal,
acknowledging that someone exists.
Yes, that would feel like the top of this roller coaster that you're speaking of. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I absolutely think that that's an important point.
I appreciate that.
That's good.
So you have an interesting step 4 because you have this recovery leaving stage. Can you tell us? And it's an interesting how you've put this recovery first and then the leaving. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So again, why I put recovery first is because I think a lot of the relationships started to deteriorate in terms of like the longevity because the partner was beginning to get their sense of self back, their independence. So it was happening typically at the same time as they were feeling worse about themselves, like the worst that they've ever felt. But they were seeking exit points, like starting to get back out into their community, starting to do some healthy activities for themselves. Going to get an education or taking a job, those kinds of things. And what would happen is I believe that those things were the catalyst to the end of the relationship. So narcissists, obviously, if their goal is control, are not going to like their partner becoming independent or healthy in some way. That's the opposite of what they're looking for. And what was interesting is it was about 50% of the narcissists who ended the relationship and about 50% of partners who did. And I wasn't quite sure what to expect there, actually. So that was just interesting to see. But I did find commonly that when it was the narcissist that ended the relationship, it was because they didn't like their partner's independence and they would find a new partner. They would actually most often cheat and then decide to leave. And maybe they were cheating all the way through too, but they would often end up with their cheating partner. When the partner would do the leaving, it was because they'd finally been exposed to different kinds of ideas and different people who had different points of view, were feeling better about themselves in some way, like I said, through work or school or other formats. And so this recovery piece, I think, starts to occur before the end of the relationship. And now the leaving piece, this is where it gets very difficult actually for people, because not only is the leaving in general just difficult to get away from that kind of control and break from a person who is doing that to you, that's extraordinarily difficult. But there's also vindictive backlash in most of these situations. And that occurred a lot of the time, even when it was the narcissist doing the leaving. Mm-hmm. So they still wanted you on the hook, even if they'd broken up with you, and were angry when you weren't. So there was a lot of conflict around that time period. And that looked like things like ongoing court battles. So you'd see massive issues around finance or custody and using the court system against their partner. And, this could take years and years sometimes. And, even continually to this day, for a lot of people, they were going back and forth through various issues to court with their partner.
I think this is a huge topic that probably a lot of our listeners would love to maybe go into more details at some point, because I think maybe we could have you back on for a third episode, maybe going into a little more details about this, because I think we're running out of time here. But I just think it's amazing that what you're speaking about. And would you be up for coming back for another episode to talk more about this vindictiveness and the legal system?
That would be fabulous. I'd love to.
Before we do that,
no, please, let's go one more. We have one more point.
Well, there's one more stage.
I know, but I want to make sure that we have her back for the legal system.
I think that's a whole podcast in and of itself.
Exactly.
I couldn't agree more. And but I just want to make sure we weren't leaving before we got
No, we're not leaving.
I'm desperate to hear about this fifth stage.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So the hindsight stage, that was a really cool one for me personally, because what I got to hear from people is that primarily they're in a better place now. Almost all of my participants were in a much better place, and sometimes even better than they were previous to their relationship, they said. So feelings of relief. And I think a few people sort of mentioned to me that they had accelerated learning about what they needed to do for themselves too.
Oh, wow.
Like it required them very quickly realizing, like I need to learn how to take care of myself. I need to figure out what kinds of boundaries I need to have in relationships, and, do some personal growth and that kind of thing. And so this particular, the hindsight arena allowed clear reflection on what they wanted in their lives. And I think a massive piece of that was learning to trust their own instincts, which a lot of them maybe hadn't before at all, really, or had to, getting back in touch with their feelings and that kind of thing. And learning not to caretake other adults.
Yeah.
That was a big one. Because there's that drive. A lot of these people are helpers in their professions, and there's a reason for that. So that ability to kind of be louder and not hide oneself. But on the flip side of that, a lot of them talked about, I've lost a certain form of innocence around how I feel about relationships. And I think that could be positive or negative. There's a little bit of good about that. And there's some things that weren't so positive about that too. So there is some loss there as well. So in hindsight, the wisdom that came from that is that we really need to have better education as a community, as being in the counseling profession, as educators of the counseling profession in the academic record. We need better information. The general public also, needs to know that narcissism is not just about being selfish. A lot of people throw that term around. Oh, this person's so narcissistic. And they're just meaning they're self-centered or they're selfish. That is absolutely not the case. My biggest set of information came from the emotional abuse that surrounds narcissism. And people really need to understand what that means and how massive that is for somebody who's involved.
Absolutely.
I think this is great.
This is fantastic.
I think if the prey, we really hope that the people listening to this podcast are prey. And if the prey take nothing away from the last two episodes, except that almost everyone in your study who left the predator feels like they're in a better place now, I think that's already a huge win for anybody listening who's questioning whether or not they need to stay in this relationship or need to get out. That alone is very encouraging.
Yeah. And I do have to say, there was only 2 who did not say that they were not doing better. And I think the reason for that is because they were fairly fresh out of their relationships.
Oh, yeah.
Which makes sense.
So there's reasons behind it.
I think this is so powerful because again, it's the focus on the prey. It's a focus on, the narcissist is such a buzzword right now. And it's so like you said, we call somebody who's being selfish a narcissist. So you're showing how we can empower the people who are being workers for these coercive controllers, these narcissists. And I think it's powerful to put the power back into their hands. And we would love to have you back, especially to talk about the legal system and maybe more tools in hindsight of healing. I think that would be really important. Recovery, getting back to yourself.
Absolutely. I think of all the guests we've had so far on our show, and as well as a number of books and stuff. Honestly, Dr. Knott, I think that you are probably the one giving me the most chills in terms of you really understand.
Yeah, you do.
You really put words to this, and I am so thankful that you agreed to talk with us today. I think that your message is a message that needs to be heard. And I thank you for the work that you've done. It's just very, very meaningful.
Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. And I that's so kind.
No,
it
it's
really,
true.
it's a massive compliment to think that I've been able to encapsulate even a small piece of this. I feel like it's something that's so difficult for people to explain. And if I've captured even a piece of that, I'm very glad.
How can people find you?
Well, I'm on the online in terms of my website for counseling. So that's at www.adventuracounseling.ca. Or you can Google Tamara Knott Counseling Vancouver, and I should pop up pretty easily.
And can you spell your last name for those of us?
Yeah, it's Knott.
Awesome. Awesome. So if you are prey and you need some support, you have your person, and you're in the British Columbia, is that right?
That's right, yeah.
In the British Columbia area, you have your person.
And I do online counseling as well.
Yeah, that's good.
For people in other provinces.
Thank you, Dr. Knott.
Thank you.
You're most welcome. It's very good to talk to you.